September 19th, 1948. Wells Restaurant, Harlem. 8:47 p.m. Sal, the butcher, Bonano walked through those doors with 6 armed men and said the one thing you never say to the King of Harlem. The racial slur echoed through the restaurant like a gunshot. Everyone expected Bumpy Johnson to explode, to pull his razor, to turn that dining room into a bloodbath. Instead, Bumpy did something that made Sal's blood run cold. He smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile a man gives you when he already knows how you're going to die. And you don't. Then Bumpy Johnson stood up, folded his napkin, and said 6 words that would make the Italian Mafia extinct in Harlem forever. What he said wasn't a threat. It was a promise, and by morning Sal Bonano knew his uncle would either bury him or disown him. The Kingdom of Harlem in 1948 wasn't the Harlem you see in movies. It was a kingdom, and Bumpy Johnson was its undisputed king. He didn't rule from some hidden office or underground bunker. He ruled from Wells Restaurant on 135th Street, a modest place with red leather booths, checkered tablecloths, and the smell of fried chicken hanging in the air like incense. But everybody who mattered in Harlem came through those doors. Musicians, preachers, numbers runners, politicians, even cops. They came because Wells Restaurant was neutral ground, sacred ground. You could have beef with someone on the street, but inside those walls you respected the peace, Bumpy's peace. Because Bumpy Johnson controlled something every crime family in New York wanted: Harlem's numbers racket. The numbers game was simple. People bet pennies, nickels, dimes on 3-digit numbers. If your number hit, you won big. If it didn't, the house kept your money. But to the people of Harlem, it wasn't gambling, it was hope. Hope that maybe this week you'd hit and finally buy your kid those shoes. Hope that you could pay rent without begging your landlord for mercy. Hope that someday, somehow, things would get better. Bumpy didn't invent the numbers game. A brilliant black woman named Stephanie Claire did. Madam Queen, they called her. She ran Harlem's numbers in the 1920s and early 30s until Dutch Schultz and the Italian mob tried to muscle in. They nearly destroyed her. That's when she went to Bumpy. "Protect my operation," she told him in 1932. "And I'll make you the most powerful man in Harlem." Bumpy kept his word. By 1948, he controlled the entire numbers operation in Harlem. Millions of dollars flowed through his hands every year. And the Italians, they hated it. Because in their world, black men didn't run empires, they worked for them. Frank Costello tried to negotiate. Bumpy refused. Vito Genovese sent threats. Bumpy go Bonano. He sent his nephew Sal, the butcher, Bonano, to handle the Harlem problem once and for all. That's how we get to September 19th, 1948, the night everything changed. The calm before the storm. 8:47 p.m. Wells Restaurant was packed. 40 people, maybe more. The jukebox was playing Dizzy Gillespie's Manteca. Cigarette smoke curled toward the ceiling like ghosts. Bumpy Johnson sat in his usual corner booth, the one with a clear view of both doors and the kitchen. Strategic, always strategic. His wife Mame sat across from him. She was elegant, poised, the kind of woman who could silence a room just by walking into it. Bumpy was eating a ribeye steak, medium rare, cut with the same precision he applied to everything in his life. Methodical, controlled. No wasted motion. That's when the front door opened. Sal Bonano walked in first. 6'2", 230 pounds of muscle wrapped in a tailored suit. They called him the Butcher because of what he'd done to a guy in Brooklyn who tried to skim money from a Bonano card game. Let's just say they found pieces of him in 4 different boroughs. Behind Sal came his crew. 6 men, all packing. You could see the bulges under their jackets. They didn't try to hide it. That was the point. The restaurant noticed immediately. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Even the jukebox seemed to get quieter, like it knew something bad was about to happen. Sal walked straight to Bumpy's table. Didn't ask permission. Didn't wait to be invited. Just walked right up and stood there, looking down at Bumpy like he was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "Bumpy Johnson," Sal said loud enough for everyone to hear. "We need to talk." Bumpy didn't look up, just kept cutting his steak slow, precise. The knife made a soft scraping sound against the porcelain plate. "I'm eating," Bumpy said quietly. Sal smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile a bully gives you before he takes your lunch money. "Yeah, I can see that. Nice restaurant you got here. Real quaint." He paused, letting his eyes scan the room. "But here's the thing, Bumpy. My Uncle Joe, he's got a problem." Sal's voice carried through the silent restaurant. "See, he thinks it's time for Harlem to get with the program. The numbers game. That's Italian business now. Always should have been." Bumpy still didn't look up, but Mamie did. She stared at Sal with the kind of cold contempt that could freeze blood. The offer, Sal continued, his confidence growing with each word. So here's how this is going to work. You're going to step aside. Hand over your operation. We'll give you a taste. 10% for your trouble. You can keep your little restaurant, play the big man for your people. But the real money, that stays with us, where it belongs. The entire restaurant was holding its breath. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was Bumpy's knife against the plate. Finally, Bumpy set down his knife, picked up his napkin, dabbed the corners of his mouth with the same care he'd use handling nitroglycerine. Then he looked up at Sal for the first time. His eyes were calm, too calm. That's a generous offer, Bumpy said evenly, but I'm going to have to decline. Sal's smile disappeared like someone had flipped a switch. You're making a mistake, Bumpy. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, Bumpy replied. This isn't one of them. That's when Sal said it. The word, the slur. The one thing you never say to a black man in his own establishment, in front of his wife, in front of his people. Listen, nigger. The moment everything changed, the fork Mamie was holding hit her plate with a sharp clink. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The entire restaurant went dead silent. Not the kind of silence where people pause to listen. The kind where everyone's deciding if they'll see tomorrow. Bumpy's expression didn't change, didn't flinch, didn't show anger. But everyone in that restaurant who knew him, everyone who understood what Bumpy Johnson was capable of, felt their blood turn to ice. Because Bumpy Johnson, sitting perfectly still, was more dangerous than most men in motion. His right hand moved slowly, reached into his vest pocket. Sal's 6 bodyguards all tensed, hands moving toward their weapons. But Bumpy didn't pull a gun. He pulled out his razor, the same straight razor he'd carried since he was 16 years old, the one he'd used to carve his reputation into the flesh of men who'd underestimated him. He placed it on the table gently, right next to his steak knife. You brought 6 men, Bumpy said quietly. His voice was so calm it was terrifying. 6 guns into my restaurant. And you think that makes you dangerous? Sal tried to laugh it off. I think it makes me smart. No, Bumpy said, standing up slowly. It makes you ignorant. He folded his napkin with the same precision he'd used to cut his steak, placed it on the table like he was setting the dinner table for Sunday supper. The 6 bodyguards all reached for their weapons. Bumpy didn't even glance at them. The education, you see these people, Bumpy said, gesturing to the 40 patrons in the restaurant. You think they're just customers, just innocent folks eating dinner. Sal looked around. For the first time, uncertainty crept into his eyes. Let me educate you, Sal. Bumpy's voice was barely above a whisper now, but it carried to every corner of the room. That man by the door, his name is Thomas. I paid his daughter's hospital bills when she got pneumonia. That woman in the red dress, her husband used to beat her. I made sure he stopped. Bumpy took a step closer. Sal's bodyguards raised their weapons halfway. That kid washing dishes in the back. I kept him out of jail when the cops tried to frame him for something he didn't do. Every person in this restaurant owes me something. Not because I demanded it, because I earned it. Another step closer. You brought 6 guns into my house, Sal. But I've got 40 soldiers. They're just not wearing suits. Sal swallowed hard, glanced around the room again. The faces staring back at him weren't afraid. They were waiting. Waiting for Bumpy's signal. Now Bumpy's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I'm going to give you a choice. You can apologize to my wife for using that word in her presence. Then you can walk out of here and tell your Uncle Joe that Harlem is not for sale. He picked up the razor, opened it slowly. The blade caught the light from the overhead fixture. Or you can find out why they call this Bumpy's Kingdom. The terror Sal Bonano had killed 17 men in his career. He'd broken bones, burned businesses, extorted millions. He wasn't used to being afraid. But standing there in that restaurant, surrounded by 40 silent witnesses, staring into Bumpy Johnson's cold, calm eyes, Sal Bonano felt something he hadn't felt since he was a child. Terror, not the kind that comes from physical pain, the kind that comes from realizing you've miscalculated badly and there's no way out. Bumpy smiled. That same smile from earlier. The one that said he already knew how this story ended. Then Bumpy Johnson said 6 words that would echo through the criminal underworld for decades. The 6 words, your uncle will bury you tomorrow. The words hung in the air like smoke. Sal's face went pale. What? You heard me. Bumpy said calmly. You walked into my restaurant, disrespected me, disrespected my wife, disrespected my people. And you think you're walking out of here? Sal's bodyguards raised their guns fully now, all 6 aimed at Bumpy. Bumpy didn't even blink. You can shoot me, Bumpy said, and maybe you'll kill me. But the moment you pull those triggers, 40 people in this room will tear you apart. And even if you make it out, even if you somehow fight your way through that door, you think you're making it out of Harlem alive." His voice was still calm, still quiet, still terrifying. "This is my city, Sal. Every block, every corner, every alley. You're already dead. You just don't know it yet." The silence was absolute. You could hear the clock on the wall ticking, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, someone's breath, shallow and quick. Sal's hand was shaking, just barely, but it was shaking. The mercy he didn't deserve. That's when Bumpy gave him the mercy he didn't deserve. Or, Bumpy said softly, "You can apologize to my wife. Walk out of here and never come back. Tell your uncle that if he wants Harlem, he can come himself. But he better bring more than 6 men." For 10 seconds, nobody moved. 10 seconds that felt like 10 years. Then Sal Bonano lowered his weapon. His crew looked at him in shock, but Sal wasn't looking at them. He was looking at Mamie. "Mrs. Johnson," Sal said, his voice barely audible. I apologize. That word, I shouldn't have said it." Mamie didn't respond, just stared at him with those cold, unforgiving eyes. Sal backed away slowly. His crew followed, weapons still out but lowered. They moved toward the door like men walking away from a bomb they'd accidentally triggered. When Sal reached the door, he turned back one last time. "This isn't over, Bumpy." Bumpy sat back down, picked up his fork, cut another piece of steak. "Yes, it is," Bumpy said without looking up. "You just don't know it yet." The aftermath, Sal and his crew left. The door swung shut behind them. For a moment, the restaurant stayed silent. Then someone started clapping. Slow at first, then faster. Then everyone was clapping, standing, cheering. Bumpy Johnson had just stared down 6 armed mobsters without firing a single shot. Mamie reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "Yes, I did," Bumpy replied. "Respect is everything. You lose that, you lose everything." Sal Bonano left Harlem that night. He never came back. 3 days later, the 5 families held an emergency meeting in Manhattan. Joe Bonano wanted revenge. He wanted Harlem. He wanted Bumpy Johnson dead. But Frank Costello, the man who really ran New York's underworld, said something that changed everything. "Bumpy Johnson runs Harlem because Harlem wants him to. We try to take it by force. We start a war we can't win. Not because we can't kill him. Because we can't kill 40,000 people who'll die for him. Leave Harlem alone." And they did. The new rules from that night forward. The Italian mob never tried to take over Harlem's numbers game again. They made deals. They negotiated. They showed respect. Because Bumpy Johnson had taught them something they'd forgotten. Power isn't just about guns and money. It's about loyalty. It's about earning the respect of people who don't have to give it to you. Sal Bonano died in 1952. Heart attack. Some people said it was natural. Others said Bumpy had a long memory. Nobody knows for sure. But here's what we do know. After that night in September 1948, nobody ever disrespected Bumpy Johnson in his own restaurant again. And that razor he put on the table, he never had to use it. Because sometimes the most dangerous weapon a man has isn't made of steel. It's the love of his people. The 6 words Bumpy Johnson spoke that night, "Your uncle will bury you tomorrow," became legend. Not because they were a threat, because they were the truth. Sal Bonano had walked into that restaurant thinking he could intimidate the King of Harlem. Instead, he learned why kings don't need to raise their voice to be heard. They just need to speak the truth. And the truth was simple. Harlem belonged to Bumpy Johnson, and anyone who forgot that would be reminded, one way or another. If this story of respect, power, and standing your ground moved you, hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear about real strength. The kind that doesn't need violence to prove itself. Drop a comment below. Have you ever seen someone command a room with just their presence? And hit that notification bell for more untold stories about the legends who built Harlem with blood, sweat, and unbreakable will. Remember, respect isn't given. It's earned. And once you earn it, you never have to demand it again. The legacy, the story of that September night, became legend in New York's underworld. Within days, the Italian families backed off from Harlem entirely. They'd learned a hard lesson: you can't defeat a king whose power comes from love, not fear. Bumpy Johnson died in 1968, exactly 20 years later, at the same corner booth where he'd faced down Sal Bonano. His funeral drew over 10,000 mourners, not because they feared him, but because they loved him. The 6 words he spoke that night, "Your uncle will bury you tomorrow," became more than a threat. They became a promise to anyone who thought they could disrespect Harlem's king. Sal Bonano learned it that night. The 5 families learned it 3 days later. And for 20 years afterward, anyone who wanted to do business in Harlem learned the same lesson: respect isn't taken. It's earned. And once you've earned it, you never have to demand it again. You just have to be willing to defend it. With 6 words or 6,000, whatever it takes.